Hi, folks. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Metarealism. This episode of the podcast will be an example of why I dislike making predictions. But nevertheless, I guess I am about to make one, sort of. Not exactly, but, well, you'll see for yourself what I'm about to say. In a way, this is a continuation of what I said in the previous podcast, but I felt that there was a need, whether rightly or wrongly, to clarify what I said before, because this is something that has been haunting me, literally haunting me, for the last day or so, since the idea first popped into my head. And yes, ideas literally pop into my head. Not the best way of thinking. I can assure you of that. But that's how I often think. Um, I mentioned the last time that I thought that there might be some type of ramifications to a possible Israeli invasion of Rafah, meaning the Israeli Defense Forces. Now, my understanding is that the Israeli government is still in negotiations with Hamas and with Egypt. They are trying to get some type of deal worked out. So far, nothing has happened. But Israel knows that there is so much international outrage against that country that it does not want to do anything to make it worse. I guess that shows they have at least a certain amount of intelligence, maybe not that much, but a certain amount. In any event, it seems as though the immediate aspect to the Rafah invasion may be in abeyance for a while this negotiation process continues. I'm grateful for that, because the New York Times article that I read yesterday, or read about yesterday, made it sound like it was going to happen today or tomorrow. Well, today would have been yesterday, and tomorrow, I guess, would be today. Either way, it made it sound like it was imminent, and it may not be imminent. In fact, it may not happen at all. That does not mean it would be good for the Gazans, because one of the conditions that Israel is making is that Hamas needs to stop to exist, meaning Hamas needs to go away. There can be no more Hamas. I mean, if I were the head of Hamas, and I'm not, then I would take that as a kind of threat. I would think to myself, well, if they want to eliminate us, what do they plan to do? I mean, we are the protectors of the Gazans. What will Israel do if we simply go away? I think that's probably what Hamas is thinking. I know it's what I would think. And so I don't think that the prospects of a settlement are that good. But by the same token, Netanyahu certainly realizes that if he goes through with this full invasion into Rafah, his approval numbers, which are already in the dirt, will go down even further. They will sink into the quicksand. And that is not what Benjamin Netanyahu wants to happen, obviously. No world leader, no matter how evil, and to be honest, I can't think of a more evil leader than Benjamin Netanyahu, wants to have his or her approval ratings in the dirt or in the quicksand. So I guess from that perspective, Benjamin Netanyahu is behaving in a somewhat rational way, whatever rational means for Benjamin Netanyahu. And I can't figure that out. I try, but I refuse to attempt to get inside that man's head. Now, I say that knowing that some people have tried, but I won't. I will not do that. I don't know what that might do to me. It might cause me permanent brain damage for all I know. And I do not want permanent brain damage. Obviously, I'm being facetious, but by the same token, getting inside a monster's head cannot be good for my personal well-being, especially as an autistic and as susceptible as I am to emotions, to flights of emotions, to really bad emotions, and the effects that those emotions often have on my well-being. So obviously nobody can predict the future, but let's take the worst case scenario, which to be honest is the one I usually take. And that is that Israel is not able to reach a deal with Egypt or Hamas, and the IDF ends up invading Rafah. Let's take that as a starting point. Now, hopefully that will not happen. I pray to God that that will not happen, but it might. It might. And I think we need to be prepared for the worst possible outcome, not because we think it will happen, but simply to get our heads straight. In other words, if we are not prepared for that kind of thing in our brains and it happens, what will we do? We need to always be on our toes, especially when it comes to malicious, vindictive, evil countries like the Zionist entity of Israel. So I have no hope that Israel will behave in the right way. But I also take no pleasure in thinking about the worst possible outcome. And yet, I suppose that is what I am going to do, even though I obviously have no way of knowing if anything I say will actually happen. I hope with all my heart that it does not. But we need to be prepared. We need to consider it so we are not caught off guard. That is the worst possible state of mind to be in right now, especially with respect to global policy. I don't know what will happen, but we need to be ready if something really, really bad does happen. Okay, so here is my thought, and I already alluded to it in the previous podcast. If the IDF invades Rafah, that will result in almost immediate, if not immediate, global condemnation from the family of nations, at least from the residents of those nations, and maybe even some of the braver world leaders. I don't think that there are that many of them, to be honest. At least they haven't shown themselves as being brave. Certainly the most powerful one in the world, Joseph Biden, is either a coward or he is a sellout, one or the other. That is not a very good position to be in, speaking as an American living in the United States, to know that your own president is either a coward or a sellout. I don't know what he might do. I suspect that he may have some harsh words for Israel. Oh, you shouldn't have done that. Why did you do that? Why did you kill so many Gazans in Rafah? And then quickly forgive them and remind the world that he is a Zionist. How many more times? How many more times does that B word have to say it? I can't imagine, but I'm sure he will. He'll find some way to squeeze that in. I imagine that somewhere in his twisted mind, he thinks that by saying he is a Zionist, he is actually helping his political campaign, when it is obvious to any clear-thinking individual that precisely the opposite is the case. Now, is it true that right now Joe Biden is ahead of Donald Trump in the poll of polls? Yes, but we are a long way from November. Nobody knows what might happen between now and then. Nobody. Whether Trump gets convicted in one or more of his trials is an unknown. What the result of that hypothetical conviction will be on him or his campaign is also an unknown. One person I listened to today speculated that many mainstream Republicans, and I didn't even know that there were any mainstream Republicans left. I thought all of them had become independents or Democrats, but okay, let's say that there are some mainstream Republicans left in the United States, that they will leave him because they will not want to vote for a convicted felon. Maybe, maybe, maybe. I am not convinced of that. I am not convinced at all. But I suppose we need to leave the door open to that possibility. I mean, it's a possibility. We should think of it. We should consider it. We should allow it to enter our minds. Whether it happens or not, I don't think so, but who knows? The world is so topsy-turvy that it's really hard to predict what will happen from, I was going to say from one day to the next. It's really from 1 hour to the next, or 1 minute to the next. We really don't know what will happen tomorrow or later in the evening. So if the IDF does go through with the previously claimed imminent invasion, land invasion of Rafah, they have already been bombing that place to the ground. What will the reaction of the international community be when they see the videos and photographs of those dead Gazans? Similar to the reaction that the world had when the Holocaust photos were released. And for the first time, people all over the world saw what Hitler and his henchmen had done to Jews in Germany and surrounding countries. The results of that were not very good for Germany. And Germany, arguably, is still paying the price. Aside from the US, Germany is the #1 financier of Israel. To me, that is a very heavy price to pay. I cannot imagine a worse price to pay. Whether the heads of Israel feel that way or not, I have no way of knowing. I hope they do. I hope they have a moral compass. I hope they realize that they are propping up a regime of state terrorists, but I could be wrong. Maybe they don't. Maybe they are totally in the dark. Maybe they are complete ignoramuses. Well, they are complete ignoramuses. I think that's a given. but whether they are complete ignoramuses with regard to the specific issue of what will be the consequences of an IDF attack on Gaza, on Rafah. I don't know. But what I suspect, and again, I'm trying to phrase this so it does not come out as a horrible prediction, which means it is likely to fail. I hope that Israel decides not to do it. But if it does, if Israel and the IDF make the decision to invade Rafah, I hope, and it's hard to talk about I hope after saying something as atrocious and as disgusting as that. But what the hell? I hope that the immediate consequence will be global revolutions in the third world. And I think that we may actually end up seeing it. For a long time, I was doubtful, and I thought that I might be dead long before these revolutions start. I mean, I am an aging man at 68. I suppose I am elderly, whatever elderly means, but standard definitions run anywhere from 50 to 65, and I am 68, so I doubt that most people would disagree that I am elderly. I don't disagree that I'm elderly. I have no problem with it. I've lived a long life. I've burned a lot of bridges along the way, and I'm happy that I have survived. So I don't mind being an old man. It means that I have experience and I have done things which have hopefully made me, I was going to say knowledgeable. I guess wise is a better term. Wisdom is applied knowledge, because knowledge can be either good or bad. Wisdom, however, is good. If you can take the knowledge that you have and apply it to existing circumstances in an effective manner, then you are a good person. And that is the kind of person that I truly want to be. I want to be a wise man, a wise old man, whatever. But wisdom might, in this case, be a follow-up to a continuing genocide. Nevertheless, if that genocide leads to global revolutions in the third world, and possibly global revolutions eventually in the first world as well, I guess that's better than nothing. I mean, it's not something that I would want to happen, but it's better than watching all this pain happen and having no beneficial consequences. So yeah, if the IDF does decide to invade Rafah, if its negotiations with Egypt and Hamas are unsuccessful, I guess the only hope that anyone can possibly have is that revolutions will start all over the third world and eventually all over the first world as well. Eventually. I have no way of knowing. Nobody does. And so this is not a prediction, really. This is really a hope based on tremendous displeasure. Because I really do not want to see the people in Rafah slaughtered. To me, that is not a good reason or a good enough reason to have revolutions in the third world. There must be a better way to do that. But I am not in control of that. In my view, the dialectic is in control. The dialectic, as I see it, is the primary causal mechanism of nature, or as some people, namely positivists, would say, the primary law of nature. Except I don't believe in laws of nature. I only believe in causal mechanisms of nature, because at least with a causal mechanism, there is room for human agency. How can there be human agency in a law? Laws are pretty much determined beforehand, and there is not much that anybody can do to change a law or to prevent a law from operating. With a causal mechanism, maybe. But in this case, I would hope that the causal mechanism of nature, the dialectic, is effective, and that it results in the creation in the third world of a socialist or communist world system, preceded by the total destruction of the capitalist world system as coined by my fellow sociologist, Emanuel Wallerstein, a man whom I deeply respect. Although Wallerstein is not a Maoist third worldist, he is a member, actually the founder, of a school of thought which comes out of dependency theory. And like Wallerstein, I, as a Maoist third worldist, am also a member of a school of thought that comes out of dependency theory. So I have that much in common with him. The third world is dependent on the first world. Look at the situation in West Asia right now. Look at how dependent Gaza is on Israel. Israel can simply pull the plug, and instantly the Gazans and the Palestinians as a whole will have no water, no electricity, no food. Israel can do that, and it has done that already. That's dependency theory. And that's why Maoism, third worldism, can be seen as an offshoot of dependency theory, much as the capitalist world system as a part of world systems analysis can also be seen as an offshoot of dependency theory. So I hope that things go along in a good way. If you are a prayerful woman or man, I am, but I don't assume that anyone else is. We are all entitled to our own beliefs. But if you are, like me, I would humbly ask you to pray deeply, that the IDF does not invade Rafah, that the war against Gaza ends. If Israel maintains its demand that in order for it to stop its war on Gaza, Hamas may go away, which, as best I can tell, is simply a non-starter. How can that happen? I mean, is Hamas going to say, okay, We will go away and we will let you form a government to replace us. The people in Hamas are not fools. They will not fall for that. But they also have to consider what the consequences might be of turning Israel down. So I don't know. I don't know. And I guess we are all pretty much caught between a rock and a hard place. We have no knowledge of the future. We can only hope that it turns out in a way that is beneficial for the indigenous people of Palestine and is harmful for the colonizers of Palestine, the Israelis. For the time being, this has been Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Metarealism. Have a pleasant day and an even better day tomorrow.